It's the Out of the Norm Show. Stories about people, places, things, and events from all across the great country of America. The Out of the Norm Show, where the stories are all about you.
You know, September the 11th means a lot to many of us. We remember it for what happened in our lives. But there was another September the 11th that was just as important, filled with terrorism, racial bigotry, and hatred for a certain group of people. We're going to talk about that and an event that happened out in Utah, down in a little valley. Peaceful place with just innocent folks trying to travel cross country, and something very significant in American history happened there that we need to be remembering. So I hope you'll stay with us today on the Out of the Norm Show, because today the story really is all about you. Hi, welcome back to the Out of the Norm Show. We're glad you're with us today. I have a very interesting story. Mr. Bob Fancher, I appreciate you being on the show today. The trail started in this part of Arkansas and goes to a lonely meadow in Utah, as we said in the open. Fill in the blanks for us there, Bob.
Okay, this was part of the westward expansion of the United States. As you know, people from this area who had come from points farther east decided that the west was the place to be. We had an Alexander Fancher in our family who had been to California twice before, 1850 and 1854. He came back in 1854 with the thought that he would move his family and a number of other families to California. And of course they wanted to take cattle and other things with them to start their lives out there. So they gathered up a wagon train, finally formed in 1857, and left this area in April. Had 40 families, 900 cattle, 200 horses, 40 wagons, about 200 oxen. So this is a big group of people that are heading to California. And they went the normal route from this area, out the old Cherokee Trail, up to the Oregon-California Trail, across to Salt Lake City, and that was a stopping point for most wagon trains in those days. They reorganized and tried to buy supplies at that point. In previous years that hadn't been a problem, but in the year 1857 Utah had moved, or the LDS Church had moved people to Utah, trying to get away from persecution they had in the United States.
Now that was up in Missouri, but it was also effective here in Arkansas as well, right?
Well, not really.
Okay.
One of their apostles, Parley Pratt, had been killed in Arkansas, but there had been no persecution in Arkansas because there was no large settlements of Mormons.
Right.
It had been in Illinois and then Missouri. And so they had moved west to escape what they felt was the persecution. They had rebelled against the United States government, and they were sending army troops out to Utah to try to enforce the U.S. law. So this is the time the wagon train comes through. And so orders had been issued not to sell any grain to wagon trains at that point. So they had some difficulties there.
Okay, those orders from the federal government not to sell grain to wagon trains?
No, that was from the
LDS
church
people,
because they felt they were going to be at war with the United States Army.
Okay, so that was the whole thing. They were preparing their defenses.
Exactly.
Okay.
At Salt Lake City, the normal route was to go southwest through Utah, but some people split off and went the northern route and went into northern California. But the remainder of the train went southwest and got to southwest Utah, and there was a place there called Mountain Meadows, which at the time was very lush. It was a place to stop for a couple of weeks, let your cattle fatten up a little bit, repair wagons, do all sorts of things like that. So that's where they camped, and they were encouraged to do so by Mormons in the area. On the morning of Monday, September the 7th, they were besieged by mainly Mormon militiamen. They were accompanied by some Indians. They had promised the Indians that if they fought on the side of the Mormons, the Mormon God would protect them. But in the initial volley, some Indians got killed, and they kind of backed out of the fight. They said, well, your promises aren't any good. So the Mormon militiamen continued, many of them dressed as Indians, until September the 11th. And on that date, John D. Lee and William Bateman came to the camp under a flag of truce and offered protection for the people on the wagon train, that if they would give up their arms, the Mormons would escort them out to Cedar City. As they marched out the wagons with the sick. Excuse me, the truck. They marched the wagons with all the weapons were in it. The sick and wounded went first, then the women and children, and they went over a little rise in the ground, and all the Mormon militiamen were side by side with the men in the wagon train. And John Higbee stood up on his horse and said, "Men, do your duty." Each militiaman turned and shot the men from the wagon train that were there. After that, when they heard the shots up ahead, another group dressed as Indians fell upon the women and children and killed all the people on the train except those who were 6 and below, and that was 17 children. Those children were placed in Mormon homes for almost 2 years. In 1859, the Army rescued those children, brought them back to this building in Arkansas for the first night, and they were given back to their families to raise after that point.
Wow. They were brought right back in this community then?
This building.
And what county are we in?
We're in Carroll County.
So we're in Carroll County in northwest Arkansas.
Right.
Wow. What a phenomenal story. But a lot of things have happened since then too, hasn't it?
Exactly. Exactly. We have been working as a group and to protect the Mountain Meadows area out there and to remember this event. And I think we've got some other people who will talk to you about that some.
Yeah. Well, I thank you for sharing the story with us. It's a solemn, important thing to remember, though, isn't it?
It is.
We're going to be back just a second with some other folks. We're not going to really take a break now. We're just going to bring some other people in to fill in the blanks and tell you more about the Mountain Meadows Massacre of 1857. We're continuing the story of Mountain Meadows Massacre with Mr. Scott Fancher, who's another one of the relatives, long-distance relatives anyway, from the 1800s. The other gentlemen were telling me the story, but one thing we left out, and I wanted to ask, when this happened on that Monday, September the 11th, who discovered that it happened? How was that documented?
It was actually, the first reports came out of California about 2 weeks after the massacre, and then the official reports that went to Washington, of course, weren't until Major James Carleton and his troops came through after learning this wagon train was expected. This was the third trip of Alexander Fancher, and so his brother and other family members were expecting them to show up in California. When they didn't, they thought something gone amiss, and so in fairly short order, within 2 weeks, there were reports of a mass massacre that had occurred in Utah. So.
Wow, so it was discovered then, but there was a report written about that then. What did they find when they got there?
When Major Carleton arrived, he wrote a scathing report that talked about seeing bones strewn across the countryside, chewed on by wolves and coyotes, pieces of clothing that were still hanging onto sagebrush and tumbleweed out there. It's a chilling report, and if anybody wants to have as far as an authoritative first-hand account of what they discovered, Carleton's report is probably the document. That's where everybody should start in trying to understand the story that is the Mountain Meadows Massacre.
But at first it was denied that it even happened, isn't that right?
Absolutely, it was denied, and then it was blamed on the Indians. And for the longest time, there was a deliberate attempt to obscure that an accident of that magnitude, or a massacre, an atrocity of that magnitude had occurred. And for the longest time, then, it was blamed on the Paiute Indians of southern Utah. And of course, in their oral tradition, they deny any responsibility. One of the reasons that we're so pleased that we finally achieved National Historic Landmark status is that it has corrected much of the historical account. And the role that the Paiutes played is no longer exaggerated, and it acknowledges that there were some Paiutes involved in the initial siege, but as far as the massacre itself, most of that falls squarely on Iron County militiamen, i.e. local Mormons.
Local Mormons in the LDS.
Right.
Starting a foundation, what brought this interest to you to get active in doing something about this?
My father is a history buff, and I first visited the Meadows 50 years ago. And at that time, it was a broken down, dilapidated monument, the remnants of Major Carleton's original monument. It had a couple strands of rusted barbed wire around it, and cows were grazing in there. There were no signs on the road directing people's attention to it, even though it was a fairly significant historic site at that point. my father became involved in an organization called the Meadows Association. And when he and another board member attempted to pursue National Historic Landmark designation, and this is back in 1990, right. They were summarily dismissed. And feeling that the LDS Church had co-opted the agenda of the descendants in trying to get some recognition for and protection for the site, he, along with several other members and myself, we formed the foundation, and we had three principal goals: unrestricted access, protection, and an accurate historical accounting. And we are delighted with National Historic Landmark because it achieves all three of those for us. And it's been a long fight with a lot of people's efforts and energies have gone into it. There are a lot of other stakeholders beside the foundation, but we're pleased that we've had a leadership role in that effort. So.
Wow. Why is it important to do this? Why is it important to have this?
It's important, first of all, to protect the site from encroachment and development that's going on in southern Utah. It's important to correct the historical record because the incident itself, prior to the Oklahoma City bombing, was the largest single act of white-on-white violence in the history of America. That in itself should make the site recognized as historically important. And it's also important for a sense of closure. The families, mine, Phil's, the other descendant families, Fanchers, Bakers, Huffs, Dunlaps, Millers. It's pretty hard and pretty difficult to go out there when, number one, there's no recognition that a massacre occurred here. There's no protection of the grave sites, and you have no right to visit them because it's on private property. So as far as obtaining some sense of closure to the families and the descendants of the victims, I think it's huge that we've accomplished that with National Historic Landmark. And
we're reminded of that with the reconstruction of the monument here.
Right. We actually erected this in 2005. It was after we had tried unsuccessfully for several years to get the LDS Church to at least consider higher order federal protections. And when we got tired of hitting our head against the wall, we decided that we would erect this monument, and it is a 2/3 scale replica of what Major Carleton had erected out there in 1859.
Will this be similar to the monument that's being built there now?
No, this is actually more historically accurate than what is there right now. In 1999, the LDS Church commissioned a new monument out there. In the course of doing that, they inadvertently or accidentally unearthed some human remains, and that of course led to its own set of controversies,
right,
and claims about who had a right to speak for the victims and for their remains. And you could say that this is in part was erected because of our sense of being denied bona fide input into what happened out there in '99, and not having an opportunity to tell the story the way history says the story should be told. Now, to give the LDS Church as an institution its due, institutions are slow to move, and they have come a long, long way, and we are genuinely grateful, sincerely grateful, for their efforts in helping us obtain National Historic Landmark status, because we asked them to carry the ball, and they did most of the heavy lifting on that effort. And it's an elaborate exercise, and it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of money, and a lot of people's efforts. So I don't want to be too dismissive or judgmental about the LDS Church. It is important in telling the story and understanding how we got here. Our relationship hasn't always been this collaborative, and we're proud that we were able to persevere and that we did. And efforts such as this and such as the wagon trains that Phil spoke to, the ceremonies that we've had helped sort of focus attention by the church on the story and the need for some sense of closure. And this is again, in my estimation, this is as close as we can come to obtaining an official apology from the LDS Church. And actions do speak louder than words, and we are very grateful for them sort of owning part of that story and helping us preserve and protect and respect our descendants, or our forebears, rather.
Mr. Phil Bollinger, right here in northwest Arkansas, comes from a kind of an interesting attachment to this whole Mountain Meadows story. Tell me a little bit about that, Phil.
Well, I am actually related to over 40 that were on the wagon train. I'm related to all Fanchers, Dunlaps, and Millers that were actually on the wagon train and then victims of the wagon.
Now, how many families were in the wagon train?
There were 14 families, and there was also a total of 29 different last names that were associated with the train.
Okay. And after it left here, but your association was actually all the way back to the leader of the wagon train, right?
Yes, sir. I am a relative of one of the wagon train captains, Captain Alexander Fancher.
Now, as we found out earlier, the purpose of the foundation was to build a national monument. What are some of the events that you guys have put together and things to bring that interest and that attention to that particular event?
Back in 2003, we, at a meeting in St. George, Utah, proposed an idea to actually stay with a timeline that would come together with the 150th anniversary of the events that took place in the massacre. The actual massacre happened on September 11th of 1857. So in 2006, we actually formed a wagon train here in northwest Arkansas. It actually started near Harrison, and we actually rode so many miles of their first day of travel and ended it here at Carrollton, where we are today. And then a year later, in 2007, we planned on, and actually in 2007 we actually finished the final 2 miles of their trip to where they actually got killed at in southwest Utah.
And this wagon made that trip too, didn't it?
Yes, it did. We've actually used this wagon numerous times as actual travel with a team of horses. I have a team of Belgian horses that I use to pull this wagon, and it's also been used for several props, kind of like we are today.
All right, yeah. What has been the general public's attitude when they find out about this story? Because this, to me, I mean, I'm not from Arkansas, but it's not a story that I've heard a lot about until I met you guys.
Well, of course, the story was kept quiet for the first 150 years because of how awful of a horrific event it was, and the Mormon Church basically did not like it talked about. It was just something that they wished would go away for years and years, but it wouldn't, and it had to be dealt with, and our foundation has played a big role in making a lot of things happen, in the past 10 years. Stuff really started happening a lot in 2007. As I said earlier, we stayed with our timeline. We actually, at the 150th anniversary, in this wagon, we were wearing period clothes. We had a couple of horses out front with an Arkansas flag and an American flag leading us. And behind us we had people carrying their family flags, and they were mostly descendants of those that were killed out there. And we actually delivered a package to the LDS Church that inside had a letter from our governor, our 2 U.S. senators, our congressmen, 56 state senators and state representatives, as well as 400 descendant letters and 1,000 signed petitions asking the Mormon Church to go forward with helping us create a National Historic Landmark for the site in Utah.
And that mission's been accomplished? That mission's been accomplished. Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your part of the story. I mean, I know it's a big, complex story. One of the things that we need to realize is it's not the fact that history gets repeated, it's the fact that attitudes get repeated when history's forgotten. And some of these attitudes that happened during this terrorism act on September the 11th, we kind of repeat ourselves, don't we, in our attitudes sometimes? That's right, that's right. And there's a very close parallel to the 9/11 that happened in 2001 to this actual first 9/11 that happened in 1857, 154 years ago, in the fact that it was religious fanatics, and sometimes that can be a very scary thing. I want to introduce you to an Arkansas educator, Miss Diane Fancher. It's good for you to be with us on the show today, and your interest in Mountain Meadows is pretty broad, isn't it?
Very broad. Outside being members of my family, I'm a teacher of Arkansas history as well as U.S. history, so this is a perfect story for me to tell and to relate to other people.
So part of the Foundation's purpose, though, is also to continue the education, isn't it?
Education is a vital part of this. One year, Dr. Fancher was presenting to our association, and as he was talking, we were talking about education, how important it was. After my review, the last part of Arkansas history that had anything about Mountain Meadows was in 1957. And that was way overdue for a story to be told. So my mission was to get Arkansas history back in, get the story of Mountain Meadows back in Arkansas history. And we worked on that as well as getting our libraries. We have got 7 major libraries. We got them in, Harrison, Arkansas, Independence, Missouri, Salt Lake City, and we also got it in Center Ridge, Utah, just right close to where the Mountain Meadows site. We also have it in Tulare County in California. That's where the wagon train was headed. We also have it in Prescott, Arizona. And one that I'm very proud of is the Arkansas Butler Center, housed in Little Rock, which is a center for all of the Arkansas history. It's a housing unit for Arkansas history, and that's where you'll find our Arkansas history as well as lesson plans for teachers to use in their classroom.
Concerning the massacre? Concerning
the Mountain
So
Meadows
all of
massacre.
Those libraries that you're talking about have special sections concerning this event? Or?
That's right. We have probably over 125 different pieces of newspaper articles, books in those units that that people can go to research. We also have 6 libraries in counties where families can go and look at their family history and pick up about the story about Mountain Meadows and their family and relate a history to them about the events that took place, because it had been covered up for such a long time. So we felt it was vital and very important to get all the sources we could, and a lot of primary sources into these areas where people could have that story and be able to relate that and relate it to themselves and to their families.
So you have the original Carleton report and all of those
we do.
First sources?
We do.
Wow. Tell me a little bit about the building that we're at here in Carroll County.
This lodge is an outstanding place. It was one of the first Masonic lodges in our county. And this is where they brought the 17 children back the first night. And a lot of the families were here to meet with them, but it was a great time of rejoicing. It was a great time also to try to rebuild, because within those lives of 17 children was our hopes and our dreams. And today those children went and made well of themselves wherever they went. They spread from the East Coast to the West Coast in the United States. So it was quite an exciting time to have those 17 lives brought back to us. And also some of them had very good memories about what took place and their eyewitness accounts. Some of them had a hard time sharing that with their children. And it was like Trifini had a hard time expressing that to her children. And it was a story that it was powerful. In 2008, we had the education seminar, which was here in Harrison, which we brought in 14 authors of different books that concerned the Mountain Meadows. It was a very powerful time. It was the authors, their story, and the review of the Mountain Meadow Massacre.
Wow. So in your mind, this is one of the most important events to remember in Arkansas history as well as Utah history, isn't it?
That's right. And just a thought of it, September the 11th, and then the 17th, 11th that happened to our country as a nation. It was a very special time. When you're out on the grounds at Mountain Meadows, there's such a special feeling there. I was there on our 150th anniversary, 2007. I was there with a Paiute chief that was standing next to me as we watched the wagon train and the families coming over that ridge. It was a powerful statement about, this place is hollow, it's very special, and it has affected a lot of people in so many ways.
And should for centuries to come, or for years to come.
Oh, that's right. It's a history that needs to be told. It needs to be told now. Like when I was meeting with President Irene, he said, what should we do? I said, now's the time to tell the story, all of us. because God has given us an opportunity to tell the story. It needs to be told, and it needs to be honored, because we won't ever have that chance ever. You and I, this is our time to go with the story.
And the story will continue, and whatever events happen in American history and world history. This is not a revisionist thing where a story is made up or reinterpreted. It's a series of events that happened because of racial bigotry, religious bigotry, and it was a terrorist act on September the 11th, 1857.
I am the rock that has been from the foundation of the earth. I have felt the wind's breath. I felt the sun's warmth. I felt the rain's strength. I felt the grass's growth. I am the rock that cries out. I have felt the warmth of the innocent blood that fell on me in September of 1857. I felt the tears of the children. I felt the footprints of the murders. I felt the footprints of the innocent. I am the rock that was moved in 1859 to cover up the broken flesh of those that lost their future. I am the rock that cries out. I am the rock that held up that cedar cross. I am the rock that was thrown aside with vengeance by Brigham Young in May of 1861. I've not found the rest that is needed to heal all that I've witnessed. I am that rock that still has the bloodstains of the innocent from Arkansas. I am that rock that needs to be put in place after 150 years of unrest. I am the rock that cries out. I am the rock that needs to hear the words that they are sorry for shedding innocent blood. I am the rock wet with tears from then to now. I am the rock that needs to see the seeds of those children that were returned home in September of 1859. I am the rock that calls out for peace for all generations to come. I am the rock that seeks words from the Mormons asking forgiveness that will allow my innocent blood to be at rest. I am the rock that cries out. I am the rock that desires to see the seeds of today to be at peace. I am the rock that has felt the wind, the sun, and the rain from the foundation of this earth. I am the rock that desires to lay in this meadow by a quiet stream. I am the rock that needs to give an account that on this day, September 11, 2011, peace was made. I am the rock that knows the desires and dreams of this generation of descendants. They must put to rest the pain and their losses. I am the rock that cries out. I am the rock of Mountain Meadows.